start her up.
Hopefully that's okay with the recording. If I forgot to say before I clicked that, I thought it would take a bit longer to go through, but if you don't want to be recorded, you're very welcome to turn your camera off, change your name, anything that you need to do to be anonymous, you're very welcome to do that. So, and if not, yeah, it'd be lovely to have you in the video as well.
Just something forgotten here. I wonder if Badan Kapali would like to do acknowledgement of country for us.
Yeah.
Do you mind?
Oh, absolutely. Would you like to, Badan Kapali? You're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I could just do a sort of a...
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'd like to acknowledge that throughout Australia, we're meeting on the lands of the first Australians who walked and cared for this country and interacted with the nature of the land, the water, the sea, the forest, the plains, and just to reflect upon that legacy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not.
Oops. Oh, sorry. Oh no. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Badan Kapali?
I was just saying I'm not great at impromptu. That was my best.
So sorry to put you on the spot.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Alrighty. Here we are. Anything else before we start, Dharmamati?
No, that's fine.
Good, lovely. Here we are. Welcome everybody. This is the second seminar we're having in the in this project, Nature of Mind project, which, as you know, will be is a 6-month project where we explore the nature of mind from different angles, looking at the work of several experts and inviting order members in our tradition to have a chat about the expert interviews that are released. So I hope you've all had a chance to watch the interview with Penny Sartori. And if not, don't worry, we're going to show some clips from it. And today we have Dharmamati taking us through this theme of nature of mind, particularly looking at Penny Sartori's work, which is about near-death experiences. And it's a fascinating subject. And I think Dharmamati is the perfect person to take us through. And, you know, when I asked him, I really was hoping that he'd say hi. And that's, you know, there's many reasons for that. Dharmamati's been ordained for a very long time. And he's one of the first people to order members to come to Australia to help set up Triratna in Australia. And that was in 1981. And that was before I was born. So he has, before some of us here were born, I think. And so, you know, so he has a depth of experience, but there's also something about, you know, Dharmamati coming here just a few years after him being ordained is some, you know, that shows something about his personality, I think, which is, from my experience of Dharmamati, is to take on these projects, take on these ideas, this way of kind of really going forth, as you will, or engaging with Dharma just really genuinely. So when I asked him, I had a sense that he'd be the perfect person because he's really interested in the nature of mind from his own experience, and he's very inclusive in the way that he invites people to reflect on their own experience, and he finds a way to allow people to engage in the Dharma in a way that's meaningful to them. So I knew this wasn't going to be a theoretical kind of exploration, and it wasn't going to be a, you know, just words. I know it's going to be very engaging and genuine. So it's really lovely to have you here, Dharmamati, and I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So I had, up until a month or so ago, I hadn't even heard of Penny Sartori. And but I've started to study her work and read her books. I haven't quite finished them yet, and seen a number of interviews with her. And just the whole area fascinates me. Just sorry, I want to change to gallery view because I don't like talking to myself. I want to talk to you. And so Penny Sartori, what I'll do, I'll just introduce what she was about if you haven't seen her video, just a little bit. And then I'll reflect on the broader themes that this brings up for me and for others. And then we'll look into more detail to the experiences, these potential experiences. And in this, I've invited a guest speaker, Amrita Shraddha, because not only is she embodies this problematic, in a sense, of science versus unusual experiences, because she works in neurology, but also has had a near-death experience. So we'll be exploring that in the second half of this in this talk. And then we'll have some breakout groups where I'll pose some questions where you can actually look into things a bit more deeply in smaller groups, because sometimes it's quite difficult to talk in a large group. The whole purpose of this is really to explore it for ourselves. It's not just, this isn't an intellectual exercise. The near-death experiences are about death. You know, this is about death, and death is about life. Because without death, there is no life. It's that they are so inextricably linked. And so we need to reflect on those things. Penny Sartori was a nurse for 20 years and spent 5 years studying near-death experiences after having some encounters which were inexplicable to her. So she really looked in, she was one of the first people in the UK to actually practically look, not intellectually or philosophically, actually question. She was in intensive care and she could question these things and found it was even more extraordinary than expected. And if you started reading her books or you've looked at her work, or even in the work of any near-death experience, they are quite extraordinary. So if you could just play that first clip, Bharati.
I mean, a skeptic would say, well, they're just sort of hallucinatory or you know, empathic hallucinatory experiences. Mm-hmm. But what do you make of it? I mean, do you make something of it because you've been studying it? You know.
Yeah. Well, I think it's to do with our understanding of the mind and consciousness, really, because I think the current scientific kind of understanding of consciousness is that the brain produces consciousness, and then when the brain stops, so does consciousness stop. And yeah, that seems quite logical. But then when you account for all of these experiences and you look at these experiences, you know, the people at the bedside, their brains weren't dying, they weren't starved of oxygen or anything like that, but they had a very clear experience which influenced how they lived their life after that as well. And so for me, having done this research, the best explanation for me is that consciousness is primary and consciousness is around us all the time. But our brains, if you like, filter out that consciousness. But there are times in our life when that filter action becomes more relaxed. And so these experiences come into our everyday consciousness.
Thank you. So this really sets up that broad theme of materialism versus idealism or spirituality or immateriality. Consciousness is primary, and this is actually the Buddhist view. Mind is the forerunner of all our activity. And consciousness is primary. So what does this mean? Why is it primary? I mean, this takes the classic view we have now is that the brain creates consciousness. This has never been proved. This is as much a belief as any other belief. Nobody really actually knows. I don't know. So if you're after some absolute answers here, you won't get them, because this is actually as much an exploration for me as anybody, as anybody in the world, because we're looking at one of the great mysteries of life and death. But the exploration of it is what is important. It's the questions that we ask, and with an open heart and an openness to the mystery. As Penny Sartori says, we can't explain it, but we can't explain it away, because these things happen. These things happen. These are very, to the people that it's happening to, they're very real. And so we have to suspend our skepticism to a certain extent. It's not saying that we don't have to, we shouldn't inquire into it. But it brings up all sorts of questions like, what is death anyway? What happens when we die? Why are we so afraid of it? You know, why don't we talk about it openly? We actually don't, you know, even in Buddhist circles, we sometimes do death meditations and various other things, but it's rarely, it's only occasionally talked about in a very open way. But why is that? What is going on here in our minds that death is such almost a taboo subject? We have to package it in a certain way. I'll just leave you with that question. Because to reflect on that yourself, why is it when it is so much part of life? And one of the interesting things is that when somebody has one of these experiences, it could be a near-death experiences, or it could be a spiritually transformative experiences, they no longer fear death. Now, why is that? Why do they no longer fear death? So we've got this openness to this mystery of life and death, which is what we're all partaking in. And this is where it gets, actually, my task of talking about this is I'm finding it very difficult. Yeah. Because you cannot intellectualize it. They're just words. This is actually an actual experience. Death is an experience. And actually, if we think about our lives, what happened before? You know, did we come from absolutely nothing and go to nothing? This is the common view, isn't it? This is the materialist view. We are born and we die, and that's it. And this is very good for the materialist view, because what else do you do in your life than seek pleasure, seek possessions, because you're not going to have them anymore, you know, you didn't have them before. So you start to get very materialistic. It really serves that worldview. The other thing that's very interesting is when people have an experience like this, they often relinquish all those, the attachment they have to possessions, because they see how limited the physical world is. You can, if you want to ask questions, you can put them in the chat, and then we're having a question exploration session after the breakout group. So if you have any, just put them in the chat, and we can bring them up if you don't feel like you can talk them out. Okay, I'd like you to play the second clip now. Already?
Yep, on it.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So let's start to talk about near-death experience, which is, which you've done this 5-year study on. I thought it'd be good just to hear some of the commonest shared experiences that people have reported to you about near-death experiences.
Well, they vary really. So they can start off with viewing the emergency situation from an out-of-body perspective, where they look down on the emergency situation. They can see people around them, what the medical personnel are doing. They might go through a dark tunnel towards a bright light. And although that's a bright light, it doesn't kind of hurt their eyes at all. And sometimes they describe like a magnetic quality about this light where they're very drawn to it. They might end up in the light and they find themselves in a beautiful garden with lush green grass, vividly coloured flowers. They might meet deceased relatives or friends, and very often the relatives or friends tell them it's not their time, they shouldn't be there. They might have a life review where they describe reviewing the whole of their life in a matter of seconds, but they can see everything. So they can see the significant things they've done, insignificant things that they've done, and it's just as if it all flashes before their eyes in a matter of seconds. Sometimes they might come to a barrier or a border, a point of no return. That could be a doorway, could be a river or gate or something like that. But they know that if they cross that barrier, they won't come back to life. And very often then after the experience, sometimes they kind of revive in their bodies and think, what's happened to me? It's like, whoa, that's no other human experience that they can relate to. It's way beyond anything else they've ever experienced. And so sometimes they kind of keep it within. They don't tell anyone. They're afraid to tell anyone because they think that they're going to be labelled as crazy. So they very much keep it to themselves. But sometimes you might find that they want to talk about it. And that's the important thing, how they're responded to then. So if they're met with a dismissive attitude, oh yeah, you're on too many drugs, which is really common to say, it can put them off sharing that experience, and they'll never share it again for the rest of their life. And of course that comes with problems then, because they don't integrate that experience. If they're unable to talk about it, they can't process it and they can't integrate it into their life. And so it can cause all sort of problems for them as well. It can cause relationship problems because their values drastically change. They're not the person they were before the experience. So they can't relate to their spouse anymore. Their values are different. It might be that they might have had high-powered jobs and really well-paid jobs, but all of a sudden things like that don't have any meaning for them at all. And so you might see career changes as well. And maybe people will train as volunteers or train to become nurses as well, or carers, So you see all sorts of differences, changes in their life after the experience as well.
There's quite a lot to reflect on there, on these things. Just to bring it home a little bit into Triratna, I'd actually like to read Bhante at Sangharakshita, the founder of the Triratna communities, near-death experience, which might be of interest to you. Though feeling physically very unwell, I was in a deeply meditative mood. Body and mind seemed to have separated, and the latter to have withdrawn to a distance of 30 or 40 feet. Observing this, I seemed to be neither the body nor the mind. I noted that so far as my experience at that moment went, the old dualistic way of speaking of death as departure of the soul from the body seemed perfectly in accordance with the fact. Though I saw that I could easily die, this consideration did not disturb me in the least. Like the two empty pans of a scale, desire for life and desire for death hung exactly balanced, without even the shadow of the turning in either direction. My mood was of profound tranquility. And then he goes on to say that somebody implored him to come back, and that's what tipped the scales back to coming back to this world. So there's a very common experience of a feeling of deep love, of tranquility. So what I found very positive personally about these exploring this is that it's lessened my fear of death. Yeah. Because it actually, you begin to open your mind to the fact that actually we're not limited by this shell that we call this body. Buddhism has been telling us for an awful long time that our limitlessness, that we are actually limitless. Now, just to explore this a bit more, I'd like to invite Amita Shraddha to dialogue a little on this, because there's nothing like the real thing.
Oh, thank you. I've got an unstable thing here that keeps knocking me out. So, sorry. Here, back again. Yeah.
Just say a little bit about your, what the experience you had and how that affected you.
Yeah. I was in a car accident in 74, and I broke my neck, and I was in a coma for a couple weeks, and they gave me a 50-50 chance of surviving. I was working in neurology at that time, and I had a fascination with the mind and with the brain, and this was an opportunity for me to learn about it. So and then I was in this car accident, yeah, and I had this experience, and it was difficult to talk about because they didn't have me on any medications really, because they wanted me to come out of the coma. So I wasn't on much medication that I'm aware of. But I had this sense of having a choice. And yes, and when I was in the coma, I was told about certain people visiting and stuff, and but I remember seeing them, and I'm thinking, well, how did that happen? So there was this awareness that was going on. And yeah, and I feel like it was all my friends and family and stuff who actually called me back. But I felt like I had this opportunity to go to this wonderful, peaceful place. And which was very appealing. Yeah, I haven't talked about this a lot, so it's hard to find the words, because it is beyond words. Um, hmm.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks for having the courage to try at least try to talk about it, because I do understand how difficult it can be to talk about these things, and this is a very common experience for people who have had near-death experiences, because it is beyond words. Yeah.
It is, and trying to rationalize what happened after the event. Yeah, I've tried to talk to, the neurologist and stuff, but yeah, I didn't even bother, because I had before this ever happened, I had had an out of body experience, and that was a no talking about that in where I lived. I tried to talk to my neurologist about it, and he seemed to want to call it a seizure. And so I thought, right, you just can't talk about this. But I knew with that one that that had more reality than life. I don't know how to describe it any more than that. And I knew that happened. And that has always been something that has made me strive to try to understand what went on. And when I had the out of body experience, more so even than the near death, um, I knew that it happened, and my cat knew it happened at the time. I had a cat, and I have an affinity for cats. I think probably because of that, because they have a sensitivity that can pick up things. So it's yeah, my cat knew where that being of my consciousness was, because I was trying to scold her for being on the shelves, and she wasn't supposed to be up there, and she knew that, and she looked straight at me. Well, my whatever I was then, and I wasn't in my body. And so she knew, but so yeah, it is hard to talk about, because I think probably in the day, if you talked about these things, you probably would have been persecuted as being a witch or something like that. And so those were things that you just didn't talk about. And of course, I couldn't talk about this with my family. They didn't want to know. And I saw from my neurologist's point of view, he was explaining it through what he knew in neurology. Yeah. And said, oh, you probably just had a little seizure or something.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, thank you.
Thanks for sharing that. I mean, it's and that's what really, talking to you about this before, this is what really turned you towards Buddhism and exploring consciousness and getting a deeper understanding of things. And that's a really good thing. And I'd like to finish this section by just exploring why are we bothering with all this?
Yeah.
Well, what it points towards is, as mentioned before, is that there's something greater. Yeah. That there's a continuum of psychic energy that we call a human being, and that. But what is the purpose of life? What are we here for? From a Buddhist perspective, we've done this again and again and again. We keep on coming back and going through the same things because we're learning something. We're trying to understand in a greater depth what this is all about. Yeah, because let's face it, forget about near-death experiences. Life itself is a huge mystery. The fact that I'm sitting here talking to you and you're sitting out there listening to me, and there's a world out there I can see the sky. That is a miracle. So, but we can't just sort of that's being very, just sort of let it go at that. We're human beings like to investigate, like to understand what's going on. It's part of our nature. And it's in a part of the nature of consciousness. And an important thing is that consciousness, and this is another thing, is not a thing. This is a really important point, that consciousness, we put labels on things, but Buddhism talks about no thingness. So, for example, an example that was made this morning, Jnana Vajra made, was that the River Thames has a particular shape, the same as the River Nile maybe, but it's the water that's flowing through it continuously changing. So everything is in a state of flux and change. And this is what the Buddha taught, that nothing is permanent. Nothing is static, everything is dynamic. So we are just passing through consciousness. This physical form is passing through consciousness. We're partaking in the flow of consciousness, the same as everything. In fact, quantum physics goes further to say that even the atom, which is coming very close to animism, with the fact that everything is imbued with consciousness, the whole universe, including what we consider inanimate. And what a wonderful way of seeing things, in a way, even if we might not experience it directly. We can open our hearts and minds to this flow of energy that is us. And we're part of it. We're not separate. Nothing is separate. Everything arises in dependence on the conditions that are there. So we have a complete interconnectivity with all life. Yeah. So why not just let go, Let go. And that's the thing that happens at death, because you have got absolutely no choice. You have got no choice whatsoever. Sorry to be so firm on this one, but the fact is that you don't have any choice. At the point of death, you have to let go. You're being let go whether you like it or not. So why not work on that? Why not work on that now? Yeah? Work on the letting go now. Don't wait till you die. We don't have to have a near-death experience to let go, to actually experience what people in near-death experiences experience. We can actually experience this now. Sangharakshita used to talk about meditation as being like the little death. This is the words he used. He called it the little death. In other words, as you practice meditation, you practice how to let go. So you feel at ease in what's come to be known in traditions like Dzogchen and Mahamudra, the natural state of not clinging, not holding, not grasping. We're letting grow of greed, hatred, and delusion. We just let go. In that, there's great freedom. So this is what it's about, and that's why this exploration is so important, because it can stimulate us to look at our own life, look at how we are practicing, look at what we're doing in our lives, because that's what matters, what we do, what we think makes our life. And we do have power there. You know, we do have choice of how we live our lives. So we either live our lives grasping onto material things, you know, egocentrically, or we can let go and be freer in our lives. And that's what I'm after. You know, that's what I'm trying to do. And you know, that's a great thing, I think. It's a great love of freedom and love are the two things that guide one's life, you know, as a Buddhist. So I think that's all I'd like to say. Thank you. It's a big subject, and we've only really just scratched the surface, but I hope it's sort of stimulated some thoughts. And so we'll have a breakout groups now, and you know, you can discuss how you know this in more depth. And there's a few questions that Varadi can put up, just to, if they could be useful to you, but just feel free to explore it in whatever way you like.